Vivienne's car died in the middle of a storm, rain pouring down as her phone blinked, no service. A sedan pulled up. A tall black man stepped out, rain soaking his work shirt. He raised his hands. "Need a ride?" Vivienne hesitated. Everything she'd been taught screamed no, but lightning split the sky, and the word slipped out anyway. Yes, the rain hadn't started yet, but the sky over the city already looked like a bruise. From the 32nd floor, Vivienne Clarke could see the grid of streets turning metallic, a dull sheen on every roofline. She leaned a hip against the glass and watched the storm gather the way she watched quarterly results, calm, appraising, certain she could read patterns other people missed. Her reflection stared back. Platinum blonde hair pinned into a sleek bun, emerald eyes that made junior associates stand up a little straighter, a designer wrap dress hugging a body that had never fit the cruel myth of boardroom invisibility. Vivienne was thick and curvy and unabashed about it, an hourglass in high heels, lipstick bold enough to count as a signature. The city loved to underestimate women like her. She loved to turn that underestimation into leverage. Aurelia's media buy came in. Her assistant said, hovering in the doorway with an iPad and the hunted look of someone delivering unripe fruit, "They want an extra $250,000 to hold the Midtown billboards." Vivien didn't turn. "Tell them we'll approve 100. Offer a creative interview with our art director as make goods. Smile like they're doing us a favor for taking less." "Yes, Miss Clarke." She checked the time on a thin gold watch and rolled her shoulders back. Long days didn't exhaust her so much as sharpen her edges. The corner office glowed with white marble and brushed steel, a stage set for the version of success her parents had trained her to play. As a girl, she learned not just the rules, but the posture. Chin up, wrists loose, voice cool. The script was simple: work hard, choose smart, stay clean. And it paid, down to the reserved spot in the executive garage below. On her desk, a notification flashed across a muted news site. Rent strike threat looms after record hikes. Vivienne skimmed the headline and the photo of people holding cardboard signs in the drizzle. The angle made the apartments behind them look like cliffs. She clicked away. There are always storms, she thought. Learning to walk between the raindrops is half the game. At 6:30, her boyfriend texted, "Dinner, 8 p.m, club. Don't be late this time. See." She could hear Chad Whitmore's voice in the clipped syllables, old money that had learned to mimic warmth. He wore entitlement like a tailored suit and admired Vivienne most when she mirrored it. She typed, "On my way," because that was the answer men like Chad expected, and because she preferred setting the terms in person. On her way to the elevator, she passed a cluster of junior staff discussing a campaign that involved glossy photos of a luxury condo. "We should shoot it in the rain," one said. "Might look cinematic." "Rain sells austerity," another replied. "Clients want sun." "Clients want control," Vivien said, not unkindly, "and sun photographs as control." They grinned, caught grateful, and she let the elevator doors close on their admiration. Influence was gravity in her world. She had learned to bend it. The private lobby of the Highfield Club smelled faintly of lemon oil and old promises. White walls, quiet staff, a sea of men in navy who never looked surprised. Vivienne found Chad in the dining room, hunched over a martini and a pair of whispered jokes with a banker she didn't like. "There she is," he said, standing just enough to be seen doing it. "The storm chaser." "What storm?" she asked, lowering herself into the seat he'd arranged at an angle, always making sure she faced the room. He liked her to be visible. Vivienne understood the exchange and didn't mind cashing what it paid. Chad gestured toward the window where the sky had darkened another shade. "Economic, social, meteorological. They're all the same thing, noise. We rise above." His friend made a sympathetic face. "My building has picketers again. Rent control nonsense. If people want better lives, they should work harder." He glanced at Vivienne as though expecting applause. "Right?" She gave a neutral smile. "Hard work has rarely failed me." "That's our Viv," Chad said, squeezing her knee beneath the linen. None of this bleeding heart theatre. The waiter appeared with amuse-bouches and small talk. Vivienne tilted her head at a painting, abstract, expensive, all gesture. She considered whether it had been chosen for its investment profile or because someone at the club simply liked it. In her experience, taste and profit rarely married without a prenup. "Mother asked about you," Chad added, dabbing his mouth as if removing a script line. "She thinks the Monaco wedding would be ideal. No pressure." No pressure felt like a necklace cinched twice. "I'm busy building a quarter," Vivienne said lightly. "The only aisle I'm walking is to the boardroom." He smiled as if she'd flirted instead of deflected. That was the way with Chad. He heard only the answers that fit the shape of the life he'd already drawn. She left at 9, with a peck on the cheek, and the knowledge that he believed she was going home to a tray of emails and a silk robe. He was half right. Outside, the air had thickened into that pre-storm hush where even taxis seemed to wait. Vivien slipped into the back of her car and told herself she liked the feeling of the leather beneath her palm, the quick catch of her own breath when she accelerated onto the river road. Wealth was muscle memory. It curled around her as easily as her hair curled if she let it. At a red light, a boy with a cardboard sign drifted near the median, shoes slicked with the day's earlier rain. Vivien glanced once, age, posture likely ask, and faced forward. Her mother's voice rose in her mind, gentle and decisive. If you want to help, write a check to a real charity. Do not invite chaos to the table. The light changed. She merged. In the morning, the storm would be news. Right now it was a rumour spreading beneath the clouds. Vivien stopped for a coffee at an oak-panelled cafe where the countertops were always wiped before anyone asked. The barista wore a faded band tee and a smile that looked practiced rather than natural. "What can I get for you?" "Double cappuccino. Extra hot," Vivien said. "Actually hot, please." "Got it." She watched him pull shots and foam milk that never seemed to reach the temperature she considered adult. At the end, she picked up the cup, tested it, and set it down with a soft tap. "This isn't extra hot." He flushed. "Sorry, let me remake." "It's fine," she said, and left it there. The cup went into a waste bin behind the counter like a secret. On the sidewalk, the air smelled like copper. Vivien recognized the scent from summer storms at the lake house. Moments before the sky split, the world inhaled. A client lunch was cancelled. A junior analyst mixed 2 markets in a deck, and Vivien unknotted the mistake with 3 edits and a manicured finger. The protest headline reappeared on her screen. City Council grills landlords as evictions spike. Someone in the hall muttered something about people gaming the system, and someone else said, "bad optics," and the office hummed like a hive that always produced honey for the same few spoons. At 5, Vivien sat alone in her office and watched the first drop hit the glass. It streaked like a clear comma. Then another, then 100, punctuation becoming paragraph until the window was an essay written in water. She was supposed to be at a press dinner at 7. She had just enough time to change coats and glide in on the updraft of her own efficiency. She rode the elevator to the garage with a faint thrill she would never have admitted to. Storms made her feel like a kid, tucked in and privileged enough to call thunder a soundtrack. Her heels clicked a confident rhythm as she crossed the polished concrete to her car. The engine turned over, and the dashboard lit like jewelry. She eased into the ramp, past the security booth where the guard nodded at her as if they shared a secret. The exit yawned ahead, a square of wet night. She pulled out, wipers whipping, tires whispering through a film of oil and rain that turns cities into skating rinks. 2 blocks from the river, a light on the panel blinked, an orange engine icon she had always treated like a superstition. The car lost a strand of power, a held note going flat. Vivien frowned, tapped the accelerator, felt the lag like a warning. "Not tonight," she said to the machine, to the rain, to the bruise-coloured sky. The lag became a stutter, the stutter became a cough. On a narrow stretch where the city stacked warehouses like grey teeth, her car sighed and went still. The wipers kept moving, faithful soldiers without an army. Water drummed the roof. Headlights from behind smeared themselves across the rear view in long, accusing ribbons. Vivien sat very still, hands on the wheel, listening to the rain find every seam. She could call a tow, call a car, call Chad, call the concierge who always said, "Of course." She reached for her phone and watched the bars collapse. 1, then none. Her breath quickened, not with panic exactly, but with calculation. The odds had shifted. She stared through the windshield at a street that suddenly seemed farther from her world than the 31 floors she had just descended. The storm intensified, the sound like static turning into speech. In the mirror, a pair of headlights slowed. A modest sedan drew up behind her, hazard lights blinking warm, insistent Morse. The driver door opened. A tall silhouette stepped into the rain, broad shoulders, work jacket darkening by the second, a figure cut from the opposite of everything her life had taught her to trust. He raised both hands where she could see them and walked toward her window through the downpour. And for the first time that day, Vivien felt the pedestal tilt. Vivien sat frozen, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. The storm had escalated from a drizzle into an unrelenting assault. Sheets of rain drummed against the windshield, each drop magnified by the harsh glare of the hazard lights flashing behind her. Her car's engine was silent now, its useless luxury reduced to an expensive metal shell. For the first time in years, she was without control. The silhouette approached steadily. He moved with a kind of patience that unnerved her, unhurried yet purposeful, his broad shoulders absorbing the storm's weight. Vivienne's pulse thudded in her ears. She thought of the conversations at the club, the warnings her parents had woven into her upbringing like embroidered scripture. Be careful who you trust. Appearances matter. Stay in your lane. She considered locking the doors. They were probably already locked, but she pressed the button anyway, a sharp click that felt like armor. The man stopped just shy of her window. Rain ran down his face, catching in the stubble along his jaw. His work uniform clung to his chest, soaked through, and his hands were raised in cautious openness. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying above the storm but softened by courtesy. "Looks like you're stranded." Vivienne's first instinct was to shake her head, dismiss him. "I'm fine," she called through the glass, though her phone screen, still dim in her lap, showed no service. He nodded, as if expecting her reluctance. "I'm a mechanic. Been working at Rodriguez Auto Repair on 5th for 10 years. Thought I'd take a look before you spend the night in the rain." Something in his tone, calm, unassuming, made her hesitate. He wasn't pushing, just offering. But the warnings replayed in her head, her mother's voice like static. "Don't let strangers get too close. Don't let them think you need them." "I said I'm fine." Her words came sharper than she intended, defensive. She glanced past him to the sedan idling behind, modest but well kept, windshield wipers fighting valiantly against the downpour. He didn't flinch. His jaw tightened, maybe from the cold rain or from patience wearing thin, but his voice remained level. "Suit yourself. Just figured I'd help." He turned slightly as if ready to leave, then looked back. "But storms get worse around here. Not safe to sit alone with no signal. At least let me drive you somewhere dry." The suggestion sent Vivienne's heart skittering. Accepting meant surrendering control. Yet as another flash of lightning illuminated the street, she realized how empty and unfamiliar the warehouse district felt. The glass and marble fortresses she was used to seemed very far away. She gripped her purse tighter. "I don't even know you." He gave a small nod. "Fair enough. Name's Darius King. You can call Rodriguez Auto Repair in the morning to confirm I work there. I'll even give you my employee ID if it helps." He reached into his pocket slowly, telegraphing every movement, and pulled out a phone, the screen glowing with the shop's number displayed. He held it where she could see, not pushing it closer. The rain beat harder against the car roof. Vivien felt water creeping past the seams of her resolve. She looked at her useless phone, the rain-streaked windshield and his patient-drenched figure waiting. "Nearest hotel," she said finally, her voice brittle. Relief flickered across his face, not triumph, just relief. Of course. He stepped back, giving her space to exit. Vivien slid out reluctantly, her designer heels splashing into shallow puddles. The cold water bit into her skin immediately. She pulled her coat tighter, mascara already bleeding at the corners of her eyes. The moment her stilettos hit the slick pavement, she realized how impractical they were outside polished lobbies. Darius shrugged off his jacket and handed it to her without ceremony. "You'll catch a chill." She wanted to refuse, pride rising like a shield. But the rain plastered her dress against her curves, and the warmth of the jacket felt like mercy. She slipped it on, the sleeves too long, smelling faintly of oil, soap and coffee. Inside his car, the contrast was startling. Clean, warm air, gospel music humming softly from the radio, a small wooden cross dangling from the rearview mirror. It wasn't luxury, but it was comfortable. It smelled like home, though not hers. "Thank you," she murmured, settling into the seat. "Not a problem," he replied, starting the engine. His voice was steady, not gloating, just matter-of-fact kindness. They drove in silence for several blocks, the rain-slick streets blurring into streaks of neon reflected from distant storefronts. Vivienne found herself stealing glances at him. His profile was striking. Strong jaw, dark eyes fixed on the road, the kind of presence that seemed carved from resilience. He drove with careful precision, unlike Chad, who treated traffic as an obstacle to conquer. "You didn't have to help me," she said finally, breaking the silence. He gave a small smile. "My mother always said, if you can help, you should. Doesn't matter who it is." The simplicity of it unsettled her. She was used to transactions, help given with strings attached, favours owed, balance sheets of social currency. His offer had carried none of that. They reached a modest hotel near the highway. The sign flickered, half-lit, but the awning cast a sheltering glow. Darius pulled up smoothly and turned to her. "Here we are, safe and dry." Vivienne fumbled with her purse. "Let me pay you for gas, or something." He shook his head. "Not necessary. Just pass it forward sometime." The phrase struck her harder than she expected. She climbed out, clutching his jacket still draped over her shoulders. He didn't remind her to give it back. She hesitated under the awning, watching as his taillights disappeared into the storm. For a moment, the world was quiet, but for the hiss of rain. Vivien stood there, the jacket heavy on her skin, the warmth lingering. Everything her upbringing had told her about people like him clashed with what had just happened. Inside the lobby, the clerk greeted her politely. Vivien checked in, her reflection in the mirror behind the desk startling her. Her makeup smudged, hair damp, her curves outlined by wet fabric. She looked less like the polished executive and more like a woman caught off guard, vulnerable, raw. That night, lying in crisp hotel sheets, Vivien replayed the encounter. His steady voice, his careful movements, the jacket still folded on the chair beside her bed. She tried to dismiss it as chance, as nothing, but the truth gnawed at her. She had been wrong. Wrong about danger, wrong about kindness, wrong about what people looked like when they saved you. And though she didn't admit it, not even to herself, she had felt something else too, a pull, a spark beneath the storm, the kind of connection that rewrites everything it touches. Vivien closed her eyes against the hum of the heater. For the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely in control. She felt something far more dangerous. She felt her heart stir. The storm had passed by morning, but Vivienne Clarke carried it with her like perfume clinging to her skin. Darius's jacket still hung over the back of a chair in her bedroom, its scent reminding her of oil, soap, and something warmer she couldn't name. She told herself she'd return it somehow, but deep down she knew she had kept it on purpose. By Monday, the rhythms of her old world had resumed, the gloss of the office lobby, the sheen of marble floors, the perfume of ambition hanging thick in the air. Yet everything felt faintly off, like she was watching a stage play she'd seen too many times. Her assistant dropped off reports. Clients called. Her father texted about brunch at the club. Chad sent a clipped message. Dinner. 7 p.m. Don't be late. At 7 sharp, she arrived at the Highfield Club, heels clicking across polished wood. The dining room glowed with chandeliers, white linen, and an undercurrent of certainty. Everyone here belonged. Chad stood as she entered, his tailored suit hugging a frame polished by privilege. He leaned down to kiss her cheek. "Better," he said approvingly. "On time. Good." She smiled tightly. Traffic was light. They slid into their seats, the clink of crystal echoing around them. A group of acquaintances drifted by, bankers and their wives, faces she'd known since childhood. Talk turned quickly to the protests downtown. "Unbelievable," one woman scoffed, cutting into her steak. "Blocking the courthouse over housing complaints. Don't they know how the world works?" "They never do," another chimed in. "Always looking for handouts. If you want something, you earn it." Vivienne's fork hovered mid-air. She had said those very words countless times before, automatic as breath. But now, the memory of Darius's voice cut through her thoughts. "Doesn't matter who it is. If you can help, you should." She lowered her fork slowly. "Maybe they're working, but the system doesn't give them much to stand on." The table stilled. Chad's brow furrowed. "Viv," he said carefully, like soothing a child, "don't get sentimental. These protests are theatre, nothing more." Her mother's voice, smooth as glass, joined from the other end of the table. "Darling, your father and I built everything we have because we worked harder than anyone else. People who fail, well, it's usually their choices. You'd do well to remember that." Vivien nodded automatically, but the words no longer landed with the same comfort they once had. Darius's jacket, folded in her closet, seemed heavier than any necklace she owned. The following Saturday, Vivien attended a company charity event. A food bank distribution meant more for press photos than impact. Prestige marketing executives lined up in matching aprons, smiling stiffly as cameras flashed. Vivien ladled soup into containers, posing with perfect posture when a voice reached her over the bustle. "Careful, Sarah. I mean Vivien." She looked up, startled, and nearly dropped the ladle. Darius stood across the table, apron tied loosely around his waist, smile genuine rather than performative. "Marcus," she began, then corrected herself. "Darius. Didn't expect to see you here." His tone was light, but his eyes held a spark of recognition, something unspoken from the night in the rain. Vivienne recovered quickly. Company event. Good optics, apparently. Optics, he chuckled softly, shaking his head. I just call it helping. She watched as he moved along the line, greeting each person like an old friend. He knew their names, asked about their children, remembered details she had never bothered to learn. An elderly woman's face lit up when he handed her groceries. A teenager leaned against the counter, confiding in him like an older brother. Vivienne found herself transfixed. She had never seen someone give without needing to be seen giving. Every smile he offered carried no agenda, no calculation. It was the opposite of her world. When the rush eased, she edged closer. You volunteer here often? Every Saturday. My mom got me started years ago. She says if you're blessed, you share the blessing. The word blessed caught her. Vivienne had grown up equating blessings with wealth, promotions, designer clothes. Darius earned a mechanic's wage, yet he spoke of blessings like abundance flowed through his life. You seem to know everyone, she said. These are my neighbours. He shrugged. Mrs. Johnson raised 3 kids alone after her husband died. Tommy's trying to finish high school while working 2 jobs. Everyone here's got a story. You just have to listen. Vivienne fell silent. She realized she had never listened. Not really. Numbers, statistics, trends, yes. Stories, no. Why do you keep coming back, she asked. Because I can. Because it matters. He looked at her with steady eyes, and she felt her chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with attraction, though that pulsed beneath it too. And because dignity shouldn't be a luxury. For the rest of the shift, they worked side by side. Vivienne caught herself watching him more than once. How he bent to help an old woman lift her bag, how he knelt to reassure a child tugging at her mother's sleeve. Each act chipped away at the pedestal she'd lived on, exposing cracks she hadn't noticed until now. Back in her apartment that night, she replayed the day. Chad had texted a curt "Hey, heard you were playing social worker again. Don't embarrass us." Her parents had left a voicemail. "Darling, these neighborhoods are not for you. Don't be naive." She sat on the edge of her bed, Darius's jacket still folded nearby, and realized something terrifying. The voices that had shaped her life now sounded hollow. For the first time, she wanted to push back. But pushing back meant risk. Risk to her career, her relationship, her carefully built image. She stared out the window at the city skyline glowing against the night. Somewhere below, protests would return. Families would struggle. Darius would show up with that steady kindness. And she, Vivienne Clarke, would have to decide whether to keep playing her part or step off the stage. Her reflection stared back at her, flawless and polished, but the cracks in the glass were there now. Once you saw them, you couldn't unsee them. And deep down, she knew the storm wasn't finished with her yet. The storm returned on a Thursday evening, as if the sky itself had been waiting for Vivienne Clarke's breaking point. She stayed late at the office, buried under reports and half-written proposals, but the noise of rain hammering against the windows pulled her attention. The marble lobby was nearly empty when she descended in the elevator, heels echoing against the concrete floor of the executive garage. She longed for the safety of her Mercedes, the hum of climate control, the illusion that her world was unshakable. But tonight, illusion cracked. Across the garage, voices ricocheted between the concrete pillars, sharp, authoritative, suspicious. Vivien slowed. Through the dim light, she saw 3 uniformed security guards surrounding a familiar figure. Darius King stood with his hands raised slightly, palms open. His work shirt was damp, his posture calm but weary, as though he had rehearsed this scene too many times before. "I told you I'm here to pick up a client," he said, his tone even controlled. "This is private property," one guard barked. "You don't belong here." Vivienne's breath caught. Not again, she thought. The same resignation she had glimpsed in Darius's eyes that night in the rain now surfaced in full. He didn't look surprised, just tired, the way people look when injustice becomes routine. She noticed her colleagues standing nearby, watching from a safe distance. Among them was Chad Whitmore, his tailored coat dry under the awning. His expression wasn't concern. It was smug satisfaction, as though the universe had just proven him right. "Vivienne," Chad said sharply when he spotted her. "Stay out of this. Let security handle it." She could have obeyed. That was the role her world expected, quiet compliance, averted eyes. But as she looked at Darius, soaked under fluorescent light, treated as an intruder for existing, her stomach twisted. This was her moment. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said, stepping forward. Her voice trembled at first, but she steadied it. He's here for me. I called for a ride. The lead guard turned toward her, brows furrowed. Miss Clarke, this individual doesn't have authorization. Vivien locked eyes with Darius. His expression revealed no plea, no desperation, just the endurance of a man who had lived this dance too many times. He wasn't asking her to save him, but he wasn't going to deny the truth either. He's picking me up, she repeated, louder this time. I called him. There's no problem. Chad stepped forward, jaw tight. Don't be ridiculous. You don't need to cover for him. They know what they're doing. Her pulse quickened. A crowd was gathering. Co-workers, staff, people she'd eaten lunches with, shared champagne with. Their faces carried discomfort, some curious, others judgmental. The unspoken rule was clear. Side with your circle, not the outsider. Handle what? Vivien demanded, pulling her arm away when Chad tried to grasp it. Her voice rang against the concrete. A man waiting in a parking garage? Exactly what you do every day when you pick me up. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She turned back to the guards, her voice sharper now, conviction breaking through fear. You assumed he was dangerous because of how he looks, not because of anything he did. The guards stiffened, caught between the weight of their assumptions and the authority of a respected tenant. One cleared his throat, mumbling about protocol. Chad's face darkened. You're making a scene, he hissed. Good, Vivien shot back, surprising even herself. Maybe it's time someone did. The words fell like a hammer in the garage. Silence followed, broken only by the rain pelting the pavement outside. Darius remained still, watching her, the faintest flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or gratitude restrained by dignity. The guards eventually stepped back, muttering, We'll let it go this time. They retreated, leaving a trail of unease. Chad seethed. Vivien, you've lost your mind. This isn't who you are. But for the first time, she felt like she was exactly who she wanted to be. By Monday, word of the confrontation had spread through her circles like wildfire. At the office, whispers followed her down hallways. At the club, acquaintances greeted her with tight smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Chad barely spoke to her, his texts clipped and accusatory. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed us. Think about your reputation. Her mother's calls came daily, sharp with worry. Darling, I heard the most disturbing thing. Security said you defended some stranger? These people aren't like us. They always have ulterior motives. You're being naive. Her father's voice was colder. We raised you better than this. Don't throw it away over sentiment. That mechanic, he's exactly where his choices put him. Don't confuse temporary kindness with character. Vivien listened, but for the first time she didn't absorb their words as truth. Instead, she heard Darius's steady voice in her memory. Privilege is like a ladder. The higher you climb, the harder it becomes to see the people below you. And she realized her parents had been speaking from the ladder all along. On Saturday, she went back to the food bank. She told herself it was to volunteer again, but she knew the truth. She wanted to see Darius. When he arrived, his face lit with genuine surprise. Twice in 2 weeks? I'm impressed. I had to talk to you, she admitted, tying on an apron beside him, about what happened in the garage. You didn't have to step in, he said quietly. Yes, I did. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. I've been living in willful ignorance. I can't do it anymore. Darius studied her carefully, as though measuring the weight of her words. What do you want to know? Everything, she said, her throat tight. About the kids you mentor, about your mother's work, about these families. I want to understand how the system really works, not how I was taught it works. So he told her. Between shifts of serving food, they talked. He shared stories of teenagers brilliant with math but locked out of college by zip codes. Mothers balancing 2 jobs but drowning under hospital bills. Men laid off at 50 with no hope of re-employment. Vivien listened, really listened, for the first time in her life. She admitted her ignorance. She confessed how easy it had been to dismiss others as lazy or undeserving. And he didn't mock her for it. He simply nodded, his voice steady. Acknowledging the lie is the first step to undoing it. By the time they left the food bank, night had fallen. Rain threatened again, but this time Vivien didn't feel fear. She felt something else entirely, an alignment between her actions and her values, fragile but real. On the walk to her car, she turned to him. I want to do more than volunteer. I want to change things. Darius gave her a long look, then smiled, the same genuine, uncalculated smile that had disarmed her in the storm. Then let's get to work. That night, Vivienne lay awake in her apartment, the city's hum faint beyond the windows. She thought of Chad's anger, her parents' disapproval, the whispers at work. But none of it outweighed the memory of standing in that garage, her voice echoing as she told the truth. For once, she hadn't chosen safety. She had chosen humanity. And though the rain had long since stopped, she knew the reckoning wasn't over. It was only beginning. That's Chapter 4, 1,000 Words. The pivotal confrontation where Vivienne takes a public stand, sparking fallout from her circle, but pulling her closer toward Darius and her transformation. 6 months later, Vivienne Clarke barely recognized the reflection staring back at her from the fogged cafe window. Her platinum blonde hair was looser now, falling in waves instead of the tightly controlled bun she had once worn like armor. Her designer wardrobe had given way to simpler clothes, still elegant, still flattering her thick curves and hourglass frame, but practical, lived-in, softer. What surprised her most wasn't the change in appearance, but the light in her emerald eyes. For the first time in her life, she looked like herself instead of a curated version meant to satisfy everyone else. She sat in a corner booth of the neighborhood cafe, the kind of place she once would have dismissed as too modest, too ordinary. Its mismatched chairs and chalkboard menu radiated warmth. The air smelled of cinnamon and coffee beans, chatter from working families and students filling the space. Vivienne had traded marble lobbies and chandeliers for this, and though her savings were smaller, her apartment humbler, her joy was sharper, more authentic. Darius slid into the booth across from her, the familiar weight of his presence calming her. He wore a plain work jacket, his broad shoulders filling the space effortlessly. His dark eyes, soulful and steady, locked on hers as if anchoring her in a stormless harbour. "How's the new job?" he asked, wrapping his large hands around a steaming mug. Vivienne smiled, a tired but satisfied smile. "Challenging, harder than I thought. Every policy feels like a wall you have to climb. But it matters. It really matters." She had left Prestige Marketing months earlier, the boardroom showdown still echoing in her memory. She had told them their charity drives were performatives, their hiring practices exclusionary, their displacement of communities unforgivable. She'd spoken the words no one else dared say, and though the silence afterward had felt like freefall, it had also been liberating. Within a week, she resigned. Her parents had been furious. "We built this life for you," her father had said, his voice tight with anger. "And you throw it away for what? To play saviour to people who don't even want to be saved." Vivienne had surprised herself by answering calmly, "They don't need a saviour. They need someone willing to fight beside them, and maybe I need that too." When her parents threatened to cut her off financially, she didn't flinch. "Then I'll figure it out," she told them. "Marcus's mother raised him on a teacher's salary, and he turned out better than any of us." Her father's face had gone crimson at the comparison, but Vivienne didn't back down. Now, she worked for a non-profit focused on economic justice, helping families navigate systems that once shielded her while excluding everyone else. She didn't earn the salary she used to. She didn't drive the Mercedes anymore. But each day she left the office, she felt lighter. "You know what's strange?" she told Darius, swirling her spoon absent-mindedly. "Sometimes I'm embarrassed by who I was, all the things I used to believe. But then I think, shame isn't useful. Action is." Darius's lips curved into that slow, genuine smile she had come to treasure. "That's the truth." He reached across the table, his warm hand wrapping around hers. His skin was rough from years of work, but his touch was gentle, grounding. "You can't change the past, but you're changing the present. That's more than most people ever do." She squeezed his hand, her heart swelling. "You saved me, you know." He raised an eyebrow. "Saved you from what? A dead car battery?" Vivienne shook her head, emerald eyes glinting. "From staying the person I was. That night in the rain, I thought you were just saving me from the storm. But really, you opened a door I didn't even know was there. And once I stepped through it, I couldn't go back." He grew quiet at that, emotion flickering in his gaze. "Funny thing is, I didn't do anything special. I just did what my mother always taught me. Help when you can." "Exactly." She leaned forward, her voice thick with conviction. "That's what makes it extraordinary. Because I spent years surrounded by people with power and privilege, and not once did any of them give without expecting something in return. You gave me your jacket, your time, your honesty. No strings. That was enough to crack everything open." Through the cafe window, the community centre across the street buzzed with life. Families carrying grocery bags, teenagers spilling out with laughter, volunteers in bright t-shirts. Vivienne's life orbited around this place now. She no longer felt like an observer. She belonged. "My mother met your mother last week," Darius said suddenly, a grin tugging at his lips. Vivienne laughed. "And? They both think we're moving too fast." Vivienne rolled her eyes playfully. "Maybe we are, but after spending 28 years moving in the wrong direction, fast in the right direction feels good." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Can't argue with that." When they left the cafe, hand in hand, the late afternoon sun had finally broken through the clouds. The streets glistened with leftover rain, light bouncing off puddles like shards of glass. For Vivienne, it felt symbolic, as though the world itself was acknowledging her transformation. They walked past children skipping on the sidewalk, past neighbours greeting one another with warmth, past a mural painted on the side of the community centre, a mural of hands, black and white, clasped together in solidarity. Vivienne paused to study it, her chest tightening. "Sometimes I think about all the things I gave up," she admitted quietly. "The security, the reputation, the approval of my family. But then I look around and I realise I gained something I didn't even know I was missing." Darius tilted his head. "What's that?" "A purpose, and a love that's real, not transactional." She smiled up at him, her curvy frame pressed comfortably against his broad side as they walked. "That's worth more than all the marble offices in the world." They stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. The city hummed around them, cars rushing by, laughter from a group of students, the faint rhythm of gospel music drifting from an open door. Vivienne inhaled deeply, savouring it all. "The rain that night," she said softly, "it didn't just wash off my makeup. It washed away everything I thought I knew about myself, about people, about what matters." Darius squeezed her hand, his dark eyes steady. "Then I'm glad it rained." She laughed, tears pricking her eyes, but this time they were tears of release. "Me too." The light turned green, and together they stepped forward, leaving behind the shadows of privilege and prejudice, walking into a future neither of them could have imagined alone. For Vivienne, love wasn't about finding someone who fit neatly into her old world. It was about building a new one together, brick by brick, storm by storm. And as the sun broke fully free of the clouds, she realized that her heart, once guarded, once shallow, once shaped by other people's expectations, was finally truly open. That's Chapter 5, 1,000 words. Vivienne embraces her new life with Darius, leaves her old world behind, and steps fully into love and purpose.